Good evening. I'd like to call the Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Is there any new business or supplementary items to add to the agenda? I don't see any. Could I get approval of the agenda? So moved. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The reports, and I just want to make a note that public input is to follow each item. So the first item of business is business licensing, and so I'll turn it over for staff. There was documentation sent out to everybody. So who's going to lead off on the business licensing? RCAO?
Yes, Your Worship. The Mayor wanted to have business licensing on the COW agenda to talk about future directions. There's a situation in our community whereby the vast majority of businesses do not hold valid business licenses. So it begs the question to Mayor and Council as to why we have them in the first place and whether or not an annual renewal is something that Mayor and Council wants to take a look at. I know in neighboring jurisdictions, they have a business license for life or one in perpetuity. So I think it's a public policy question that other municipalities in the region are starting to think about and ask questions about. So staff are looking for direction and a public conversation about what that might look like in Souk.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions of Council? Questions or comments? Yes. Councillor Ray.
Yes, I guess it's something that has been discussed, I think, through both my first term and my second term, comments being made in the community around businesses that do and don't have. And I think I would tend to lean towards, because those who are being the honest ones, they're the ones that are paying, and those who, I guess honest shouldn't be the correct word. I don't want to be misquoted in terms of what my intention is. But those who get out and take the time to go and get their business license, I would certainly look for input about what the cost would be to us if we decided not to go past other than a first initial business license that would go in perpetuity. I'm not quite sure what the amount is currently that we do get and what the estimate is, what we're not getting in terms of that amount. So I would certainly be interested to take a look. I think it would add to the opportunities for businesses to come out to Souk. I think there's some opportunities there, but I'd like to see the numbers first.
Councillor Parkinson and then Councillor Berger.
Through your worship, with our business licensing, I know that a number of businesses do not hold them, but if we have a bylaw and we don't enforce it, I don't believe we should have a bylaw in place then. Because if we're not going to enforce what we place and half the town doesn't have it, that is truly an unfair playing field for everybody concerned. When it comes to having a 1-year business or a license that you buy just once, will it be the same thing where only half the town buys it and the other half doesn't? And if we don't enforce what we put out, then we shouldn't be putting them in, I believe. And my other question too, is there, when you have a business license which you purchase once for perpetuity, is that also with the licenses that you can buy in different municipalities to be able to work elsewhere? Like, how does that part work with that? Pardon me?
I'll turn to staff.
I'll have to take that question on notice and get back to you. I'm not sure what if it's an annual renewal or not. I can say, though, that the decline in the number of businesses getting licenses continues, our revenue stream shrinks along with that. So we can certainly bring some numbers back to the conversation. I don't think it's a significant amount of money on an annual basis, but that money is collected, and a portion of those monies do go into our arts. And I'm not sure if people around here, yeah, it goes into the arts. with some of our arts grants. That decision was made a long time ago, and I'm sure this council doesn't remember. But, yeah, Councillor Ray does, but that's where the money goes. So some of the criticisms we've gotten from the Chamber, some of the criticisms we've received from the Chamber is that money should be going back to businesses. So it's a larger conversation I think we need to have at this table. It's certainly something I've asked our Director of Finance to take a look at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Berger.
Thank you. I was happy to see this come up for discussion in a forum like this because I think it really needs to be discussed on what do we see happening and then where. For me, the key pieces are, so I'll just read off a few of the comments and the questions that came to me when I saw this come up for discussion. So first and foremost, what are other municipalities doing in the CRD? What are the standards that other municipalities are using as far as what their business bylaw looks like? Because when I read through our actual current bylaw, it is quite outdated too. Like there's a few points in there that I think we don't really need. And then if we're, depending on how stringent we're going to be, like we need to have a greater discussion on what that looks like because it's been since 2007 that it's been updated or revised and things have changed. When Langford, I think it was Stu Young was on the news a few years back and he talked about making business bylaws just you get your first or your business license you get your first business license and then excuse me, that's for the life of the business. I like that model and I'm just wondering how many other municipalities follow that model and then what does their bylaw look like, and then further to what Councillor Parkinson was saying, when you look at our community and you talk to different business people, the main questions are, what benefit do they get from holding the business license? So I think it would be really nice to let them know that part of the funds do go to SPA and wherever the rest of the funds go to. And then what are the ramifications of not having one? So if a business doesn't have one, so like what are the ramifications of that as well? And then I do believe that sorry, I'm trying to kick this cold. I do believe that the intermunicipal business license is held to a different and a higher standard. I don't know if that, and I don't know what that is. I don't know what that looks like. I know personally our own company, because my husband and I have a contracting company and we work throughout different municipalities. We've held a business license in the last 10 years in Oak Bay, and we just buy it at whatever municipality he happens to be at the start of the year, wherever he's working, whatever's most convenient. So I'd like some answers on what that looks like too, like what. I don't know, and I didn't take the time to look it up for tonight. I was sort of hoping maybe somebody knew what that was, but is there a different bylaw for that? Is that held to a different standard?
If I may, through the chair, to Councillor Berger, the intermunicipal license is different. It's under a different bylaw. My understanding, and I may be wrong, but my understanding is that you must apply for the intermunicipal business license in the home district where you're located. So you must be a resident of Sooke in order to get one somewhere else.
Unless that's been a sticking point recently that we've done it before.
And it goes back to, I think, previous comments about enforcement. And you take a look at the cost of staff time administering business licenses opposed to the revenue stream that you're getting in, and you lay over on top of that enforcement, and then your net benefit is probably in the negative with respect to what we're currently doing. And I think that's why the City of Langford went to the one license in perpetuity. It was seen to be, giving businesses a bit of a break. I'm only aware of the City of Langford doing this so far, but I do know that amongst the CAO table, we meet once a month, and this certainly has come up on a couple of different occasions. The benefit to the business owner and the benefit to the district and the residents is such that the fire inspections are done on the more complex buildings. So that's something that we need to keep in the back of our minds when we're moving forward with the conversation, is that is a benefit to our fire department.
So sorry if I can just jump back in. I like the committee structure where we can just jump in. I think that's a fantastic part, that when this comes to the council table, I'd love to see, I'm not sure if the rest of the council agrees with me, but I would love to see in a report how many business license we've had. Maybe we can just even do a snapshot of the last couple of years. I'm hearing that it's declining and people aren't renewing. So it'd be interesting to see what those numbers look like. And then if we can get information on what our neighbors are doing and how that's working for them. And then for me, the key point is, where does that money go? And I think that speaks volumes to a business owner as well. It'd be interesting to know, like, what are your, that's when people say, well, what do I get for it? Nobody's going to, come knocking on my door if I don't have it. But it'd be nice to put out the positive of, listen, if you hold a business license, here's where that funding goes, and this is what we can help do in our community. Thank you.
And
Councillor Parkinson.
When we talk about where the fees go, you had said that it went to the SPA committee, and I've been involved with SPA since 2003. And it's always been 3% of the building development permit fees that went to SPA. So I'd like to see how much money from the licenses have actually gone into that account, and see what the difference is, because that's all I've ever known where the money's come from. And the other thing too was a concern about doing business with businesses in Sooke, with the district doing business with businesses in Sooke that do not hold business licenses, when there are the same type of company that can offer the same thing that hold a business license. And from my understanding, being on council previously, that it stated that we would not do business with these companies unless they did hold a license. And when we first did the business license, it was based on all the municipalities, and so the bylaws were the same for each one of the municipalities, so that we were all on the same playing field for each business. So that would be interesting to see if that is still the case.
Councillor Berger.
Sorry, just one last comment. I forgot to open up the bylaw where I had other notes. So within the bylaw, when I was reading through it, when this report comes back to council, I think it'd be interesting to look at just the bylaw pretty much states if you want to have a garage sale, you need to have a business license. There's language down in here, point 7, let me just find it, talks about yard sales. So do we have a yard sale permit that we should be selling, or is that something we want to keep or do away with? I mean, I've had yard sales and whoops-a-daisy, I've never gotten a permit.
Yes,
so, but when I lived in Massachusetts, they would come and check. You would have to go and file for, I mean, the enforcement is different, but you had to have a permit, and they came to check your house and make sure that don't have stuff out on the street, and it was really quite enforced. Obviously, we're not heading that direction, but that's just one thing that spoke to me that we could probably take out of the business license bylaw. So there's lots of things that I sort of, with my highlighter, struck in here that I didn't really see as relevant. Thanks.
And if I may, through the chair to Councillor Berger, there's no doubt that our bylaws in general need updating. This one in particular caught the eye of our legal counsel, and they've also made some suggestions on how we might be able to improve it. That said, I think I need to go back to what Councillor Parkinson said earlier with respect to enforcement. And staff will be coming to Mayor and Council and having a conversation with respect to what does enforcement look like in the District of Sooke. Currently, we have one bylaw enforcement officer. She works 8:30 to 4:30. Everybody in the district knows that. And so when you talk about our bylaws in general, there is very little enforcement, if any. We're doing really well on the unsightly premises and doing some good work in that area. But the rest of our bylaws in particular, we need to have that conversation about what does that look like in the district.
Councillor Parkinson. Councillor Pearson.
Thanks to the chair. Well, I guess it comes down to the essence of the intent, and I mean, people on the other end. I mean, we're sitting in here, and there's a whole other group of people out there who look at it as another form of a tax grab or grabbing money for something. And I guess if they don't see benefit, then there's little or no participation, and then, you know, we have a bylaw that if you read it, it says that the fine is double what the cost of the license is. Well, it's an antiquated bylaw for something that definitely needs to be rewritten. You know, the businesses themselves in Sooke already struggle enough as it is in a lot of cases. You know, they're taxed, their hands are out, you know, they pay commercial rates for everything. So I'm not sure it's, I mean, maybe the intent is good, and it's you know, get a sticker on your window that says, you know, you belong to, you know, the Better Business Bureau or the Sooke Business Association or whatever it is that it does. But it has to be benefit, it has to be tangible to the business owners, or else they're not going to participate. I mean, it's simple. They're getting hit hard now. So I don't know what the answers are. I guess rethinking the whole bylaw myself is, I don't have the answers. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Everybody finished? Okay, I'll put my 2 bits worth. Myself and Councillor Parkinson were on council when bylaw was put into play. There were 2 reasons for it. One, it was actually requested by the Chamber of Commerce of the day and their board of directors. They were not in opposition to a business license program being implemented. Part of the rationale was because there was intermunicipal business licenses being issued that covered 13 municipalities, and people would pay a $100 annual fee. It seemed out of sync that Sooke was one of the very few, if not the only one, that did not have a business license program. The revenue generated was to go in 2 directions. One, to help defray the costs for bylaw enforcement, and the other was to help defray the costs for the annual contract that the district had with the Chamber of Commerce at $28,000 a year. Does that sound correct to you? And so that was the rationale behind it. We had anticipated that revenue in its infancy was going to be in and around $40,000 to $45,000 per year. That's what we were advised. And so it seemed to make sense to bring it in. There was also discussion that put forward by the Chamber that they should, in fact, get all the revenue from the business license program. That information was given to our lawyer, and we were advised that we could not do so because it was a fee for a particular license, and we didn't have the authority to pass on that money that we were collecting for that purpose as a licensing fee to an organization like the Chamber, because it would be viewed as twofold. One, you shouldn't be collecting the money in the first place, and secondly, it could be viewed as a subsidy to business. So, and I'll to be corrected, but that's my recollection, and I'd look to Councillor Parkinson to correct me if I'm wrong. As we all know, there's little or no corporate history in the organization. There's not many people around here that have been here for some time or have this background. And the records, you got to dig deep through all the ways, of paper to actually get to the crux of a lot of stuff. So I'm of the view that we do need some additional information. I think staff have heard that. I think it's critical that if there is any revenue stream that's going to be lost, where is the shortfall going to be made up from? Do we increase taxes to accommodate that, or do we reduce services? So it's a zero-sum game. The other is that the intermunicipal license is a separate issue because it derives a separate benefit that applies to 13 municipalities and businesses operating there. I think we should also get information just relating to what Councillor Berger said. What was the historical revenue stream and what are the trends? My question is, did we send out notices to everybody that, and I know that was the pattern in the past, or did we just rely on email notices or letters that would go out annually? So could I get a motion to at least capture what everybody said.
I move what you just said.
Oh, shit. Yes, but I'd like to at least get a motion on the floor, and then I'd like to hear from the public. So is there anyone who's wishing to make a motion? The staff understand what our requirements are?
No.
Okay, well then,
If you could clarify that in a motion, I'll be glad to put it up.
yes.
I make the recommendation that we receive information on past business license. The past 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 3 years, to see the flow of the licenses, what we've received. We want to know what we've received and what we haven't for business licenses for the past 3 years.
Councilor Parr, are you speaking of revenue?
Pardon me?
Or are you speaking of number of licenses? You're speaking of license revenue?
Revenue and number of licenses. Because there's different costs associated. And the cost for intermunicipal licenses, where they have to be purchased, whether they're purchased from Souk or elsewhere.
Thank you. If I may try to help tie things in a big red ribbon for everybody, I think what you're looking for is a cost-benefit analysis on continuing with the business licenses as we have them now, and what are some of our opportunities to do things differently. That will incorporate intermunicipal licenses, historical trends, and costs.
Councillor Parkinson has moved that. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ray.
Yes, and perhaps I was under the understanding from our former Director of Finance that money that came out of the business licenses did go to support the spa, but it sounds like that may not be the case, and if somebody could just confirm that for me, because I don't like to give out wrong information. Thanks. And I may misunderstood them as well, so I'm not going to point fingers.
Okay, so before we finish with this, is there any member of the public who wants to be heard on this matter? Okay, good. Please come forward to the seat and state your name and address for the record. And we're allowing 2 minutes on this item, each person. Thank you.
Got it. All right. Diane Bernard. Home address 2018 Penang Road. And I also own a business in the community, and I own a commercial building. The issue of business licenses, I think, is quite important. And I'm actually going to speak in favor of it. Because, one, you want to know, as a councillor, how can you take leadership and assist businesses in the community when you don't know how many are out there and you don't know the nature of what they're doing, just in terms of identifying them. You have home-based businesses, you have traveling businesses, you have house businesses, you have businesses in the core, you have businesses outside, you have all kinds of things going on there. Even just thinking of where I get my hair cut, you'd want to know. And I think it's important for the fire department to know these things in terms of safety as to when the public is going into different places. So there's a record that needs to be kept. The other point is that I'm quite surprised that the money, I understand that portions of it has to be used in terms of auditing it and enforcing it, but that it would be going into general revenues and not found as a way to go back to help businesses. The third point I wanted to make is that in my business, we were in the final stages of getting monies, loans for our business to build. And the very last thing on a file that was this thick that was required in order to verify that we would be able to qualify for the loan was our local business license. It's also the last thing that we were required to file into export, because we do export outside of not only the community, outside of the country, and we needed to have our business license on top of that file to go forward. In order to work with Export Canada, we needed to have that. I think that in some sense, while Souk, you may think Souk is a bunch of small businesses, There are many businesses that are now looking to export. They're meeting with trade commissioners to talk about how to get their products out there. And the key requirement is, are you a legalized business in your own community? We're up against the wall right now going with Korea, and we've been to the staff here to help us, and they have been exemplary, like in terms of providing us with the necessary documents to prove that we exist, to prove that we do what we say we do, and prove that we are legitimate inside a municipality. However, it still doesn't quite cut it like a business license that's stamped by the municipality.
Okay,
And so,
I'm going to have to cut you off there.
okay, so thinking forward,
Yes.
like that's going forward, that's what you got to think, not what's been sort of cavalierly handled in the past. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next speaker.
Is that on already? Yes, it is. My name is Britt Santowski, and I live at 2206 Church Road. As you know, I am the owner of a small business. I also speak in favor of business licenses, because it does legitimize what you do. I don't consider the license very expensive at all. I have an intermunicipal license for expansion purposes, and I think it's a good thing. The other thing, I would strongly recommend that you guys speak with the owner of the Barking Dog. They have recently expanded into Sydney as well, and they're operating out of both places. She talked with me about how Sydney does it, and they have lunch and learns that are paid for through their business licenses. And that stimulates economic development. It stimulates businesses working together. And I'm a little disappointed to hear that the money that we pay does not go back to us in any kind of service or anything like that. I'm glad that it funds the arts, but I'd like to see Lunch and Learns something to the advantage of businesses. I don't get a lot for it. I support it, and I'd like to see more return going back to the business owners. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Yeah, and I just want to reiterate what I said earlier and in my remarks, is that when the business license bylaw and the fees and charges were implemented, it was done on the basis that revenue generated would do two things. One, offset building inspect, offset bylaw enforcement, and to help pay for the fee-for-service contract that was with the Chamber of Commerce for, is it 11 years? It's quite a few years. And that was roughly, over that period, over $280,000. That's $28,500 a year since 2007. And so it was a considerable amount of money. And that's what I was advised last year as to what the total would be. So money was specifically earmarked for that purpose. Okay, thank you very much for your comments. Okay, council members, Councillor Parkinson.
I forgot to mention that I too was talking to my banker, and they actually said that they do not give out loans unless you have a business license from the TD Bank. So I don't know if anybody else does that or not, but that would be good to know.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more questions, comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item is the official community plan. And so we've been given a report. And who's going to lead off this? Danica? Or is Danica going to be? Okay, great. Thank you.
Am I on? All right. Thank you. It's really nice to be here with you guys. Finally. Okay, so I have a very quick report to give you an overview about the official community plan and what's been happening so far. So for the public here, a review of the official community plan was proposed as a part of Council's strategic plan for this year. And so I'll give you an overview. Is this right? Okay. So what is an official community plan? The intent of it is to represent the community's vision for the future. It's a framework that guides growth and decisions about the use and management of land and resources, how and where residential, commercial, and other types of development will occur. It provides guidance for the necessary roads, water, sewer, and other infrastructure to service the community, and it also provides policies concerning environmental, economic, community health, and well-being, as some, maybe more as well. The legal requirements for an official community plan are to set out the community vision and a course of action for the plan area through a document that outlines policies needed to achieve its goals. The Capital Regional District has adopted a regional growth strategy, and the Local Government Act requires that the OCP be consistent with the regional growth strategy. Section 477 of the Local Government Act outlines a series of steps for the adoption of the OCP, which includes consideration of the plan in conjunction with the district's financial plan and referral of the plan to the Agricultural Land Commission and other key agencies. A public hearing is required, and each reading of the OCP bylaw requires an affirmative vote of all council members rather than the majority of those present in voting. Oh, come on. Oh, maybe that was just the wrong one. Sorry. So this is a chart just to show an example of how the strategic plan can be linked to the official community plan as prescribed under the Local Government Act. You can see that the sun at the top is the official community plan, and so it's meant to be based on the vision of the community. It represents the will of the people who live in Sooke. Okay, and basically council strategic priorities can be formed based on that. Section 478 of the Local Government Act prohibits the adoption of bylaws in the undertaking of any works following the adoption of an OCP that are inconsistent with the plan. The engagement process that we've taken so far for the official community plan review process is just quickly outlined in this passport. Many of you would have received this in your boxes. Gosh, it was like July. So you can see the agenda that we followed throughout the summer and into the fall. We basically followed that schedule, as well as had 7 online surveys that have been open for the duration for the public to get to whenever they have the chance. We also held an open house at the community hall in October in partnership with the Talktober event. Some of the highlights are that we've received a total of over 650 online surveys, which came into over 6,000 individual comments through online surveys. Feedback from each of the events was detailed and significant. I have about 180 people that have provided personal emails that want to be kept in touch on the whole process. And people were pleased to have a variety of different opportunities to express their concerns and their ideas. So just how do you sort out all of that information? I basically have done some very large matrices that pull together the themes that have come out. And so this is a very succinct overview, and I'll just hand these out to everybody too. Quickly, you have your own. It's a very long document, and I think I'm going to give up this. All of that information and put it into something as concise as possible. So at the top, you'll see we've got 3 big goals for Sooke. And, you know, the surveys asked, why do you live here? What's important to you? You know, what do we need to do as a community for the future? And these three things, in this order, were the big things that came out. The first one, protect the environment. You know, we want decisions that are based on the impact to the environment to come first, the community second, and the economy third. People value nature and the environment first. Secondarily, they want to celebrate community. They want to really, you know, celebrate the culture that's here in Sooke. That involves Sooke First Nation. It involves the arts. It involves the heritage. All the things that, and then obviously our volunteers and the services that are so important to the community here. And then thirdly, really, if we do those other two things first, we will build our economy, okay? And we want to support innovation in work and play. People want open-mindedness with a focus on opportunity, and they want to build on our existing assets. So those are the three big ones. And then from that, there were 12 key themes that came forward. So the first one, connectivity. So they wanted to connect to more key destinations with more sidewalks and trails, improve and promote transit and mobility options, get people out of cars, and reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Secondarily, now these aren't necessarily in order, just so you know, planning for future generations. Protect and secure views and public access to the waterfront, develop partnerships to acquire key natural and cultural human assets when opportunities arise. Some of these things, for instance, now we don't have an acquisition strategy within the existing OCP. So what pieces of land are really valuable to the community and should we maybe be thinking about? And a lot of people are thinking that way. Design green. Design neighborhoods with the environment in mind, commit to green building technologies, ensure efficient and innovative infrastructure systems. Celebrating our culture, which includes partnering with First Nations, promoting and celebrating more art. Remember to protect and promote our roots. Safety first, plan and prepare for emergencies and wildfire. Improve the road and highway safety, and improve our public education and prevention. Embracing the community is number 6. Support programs and infrastructure that promote the well-being of families, youth, and seniors. Appreciate and recognize our volunteers and their efforts. Food security. Support and celebrate our local farms and their employees. Promote market value. Promote and market value-added products. The harvest, local markets, and artisans. Keep Sooke affordable. Encourage creative options for housing, support innovative options for land purchase and rent, ensure affordable options for everybody all the time. Create jobs, buy local. Provide incentives for new and local businesses, support options and innovation to test the market. Encourage and promote green and our new businesses. 10, innovative, efficient infrastructure. So enhance our circulation, mobility, and infrastructure systems. Use asset management as a tool for ensuring sustainable and accountable decision making. Preserve our ecosystems, number 11. Monitor our finite resources, our land, our air and water, and preserve our habitat and wildlife corridors. And then number 12, strive for excellence. So promote Sooke as a destination, commit to education, learning, and communication, and building partnerships. So that's the overview. And that's the end for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Danica. Members of council? Oh, sorry, our CAO?
Thank you. Mayor and council might recall that staff sent you a series of questions about a month ago for things to consider as we go through our OCP conversation. Those questions we can go through, we have to have a discussion tonight about each one of them, but it's something certainly that I need to see in these chambers and to our public. These are the questions that we're asking council and the community to contemplate moving forward. The second part of that email was with respect to how does council want to be involved as we move forward in these conversations. So I just wanted to remind Mayor and council that's kind of the job that we gave you about a month ago. I just need to reiterate something that's in your executive summary of this report that you have in front of you, is that the OCP describes how and where residential, commercial, and other types of development will occur, including water, sewer, and other infrastructure to service development. So please keep that high level in mind as we move through these series of questions that include the industrial question. The District of Sooke has a competitive advantage in this region with respect to identified industrial lands. And we do have a competitive advantage over our neighbors if we continue to identify more industrial lands. That's where we're going to get a lot of economic drivers happening and jobs in the local area. It's really important. The technical industrial question, do we want to try to attract tech parks and the tech industry? I know that the city of Port Alberni has recently encouraged a tech company to come in from the Los Angeles area to set up shop in their area. And the way they were able to do that is selling lifestyle. And that's certainly Sooke has an abundance of. So it's something that we're asking you to consider. The agricultural question, there's no surprise there. We've got a lot of lands in the ALR. Some people think that the lands in our town core shouldn't be in the ALR, so there's that whole conversation. I met with the CEO of the ALC when I first started here last year, and she said that we didn't need to have a separate agricultural plan in order to have that conversation with the Commission. What she did say, however, is that we should include staff from the ALC in the root the grassroots development of our OCP, so they have a fulsome understanding of what makes sense in this community and what doesn't. They don't like the one-off requests, and they say it's very difficult for them to approve any one-off request without having an understanding of the larger picture. So I promise that that's what we would do, is include them as we move forward in the conversations. Guidance on development permit areas. Where do you want to see growth? What kind of growth do you want to see? That includes sewer and water. And then guidance on commercial areas outside of the town centre. And what we mean by that is mayor and council interested in having little nodes where, say, for example, in Cecinas, you can have a corner store and maybe a little restaurant or something, so that people can get out of their homes and walk and support smaller local economies in these growth node areas. So that's certainly something that we're asking council to consider. And of course, there's always the priorities that we hear from our residents in Sooke, environment, economic development, and all those 12 different themes that ran out of the consultation so far. So I'm not sure how long you want to stay here tonight or how you want to approach the questions that we've brought before you, but staff are looking for direction from mayor and council on what are the next steps and what do they look like for you.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Tate is here. She's asked me to carry on with chairing this meeting, and I'll turn it over now. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. Through the chair to Ms. Rice and your team for putting this together. I know it's been a long journey, and I got to attend a lot of these events. And I guess through the chair to the CAO, one of the pieces I think that for me is that I need to understand as we move forward with, and I hope we're going to call this the refreshing of our OCP as opposed to rewriting our OCP, and I hope that's kind of, that's my vision, so I'll share that with you, and I'm not sure what the other councillors think. But there's a tactical piece to this that I think has been missing in the past. It's everything that we've learned, over the last 4 or 5 years is that your OCP is a great guidance document, but it has to have a practical or pragmatic application against your own bylaws. So one of the things I was hoping for is that once we get sort of to the draftier stage of this, is that we take it to our, and I don't know if we go to our legal counsel for his or her review to say, where are these collisions? Because every time we come up against those collisions, then we're told is that our bylaws override the OCP. But the public has given us tremendous input, and their desires and wants are in the OCP. So it feels counterintuitive, particularly if you're sitting out there and say, well, Artisans Alley on, there's no way there should be a car wash on Artisans Alley. Well, that we struggled with that, and then I remember that 5 years ago, and some people brought that up because, and then on the next page, it says no cars below the highway. Well, there's kind of there were some confusing things in the OCP. So, and again, this document, wonderful document, but very, very ambiguous in many ways and can be used both ways, pro and con, in many applications. So I'm looking forward to that practical application of the OCP. There's a couple of missing pieces in it. For me, as in, you heard me at the last meeting, the OCP should identify that water goes to our boundaries. And then instead of hearing back from the parent boards, oh, well, if a bunch of residents want to get together to put a financial plan together to bring water to their properties, it should be, because it's not identified in our OCP. They use that at my last Wandafuka Water Commission meeting, they used that argument against us making application to extend that. Well, it doesn't, not clearly spelled out in your OCP. Well, that's something we need to look at. That's just one little avenue. This is a very nice direction, and I think it gives us what the public wants. So, anyways, that's my opening statement, is that I think it has to have that pragmatic side for me. That's what I'd like.
Councillor Parkinson.
I'd like to say thank you, Ms. Rice. That I think this is a wonderful start to the project, and I really do like the 3 big goals. I kind of fall in line with all of these, so I think it's a great direction that we're taking. So what is the next step for you from here in regards to putting the project together?
Well, this is why we're here. If you have any time, I think I'm in the stage right now where I've looked at 20 or 30 different OCPs, right? I've written myself about 5 in different capacities over my career. And you can put in so many different things. And I know you don't want a massive document. There are some things like indicators that can be put into master plans so that you have full circle accountability. Having something very high level so we don't contradict ourselves. Maybe having, or hopefully anyway, trying to keep a simple document that where the details can go into the zoning bylaw. It's a lot easier to fix a zoning bylaw than to modify the OCP. So there's things that we can do, but we're looking for your guidance. I'd really love to know what for each of you really like in this document, what you think could be improved. And then, I have some of that information from the public already, from the community. And, hopefully we can put all that together. And we're open to how you would like to step on board now and, and help steer this thing. I need your support and assistance and ideas.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ray?
Yes, and through the mayor to Ms. Rice, you've actually captured a lot of what I've written down in terms of the document itself. I want to recognize that a lot of work and time and effort went into the OCP. That was our first OCP. And I agree with Councillor Pearson as well. I like the idea of a more higher arching, driven, philosophical vision. And as you laid out, and perhaps maybe put it in the bylaw, because I think that has been the challenge for council, both the first term and now into this term, is it's hard when we're sitting here and we've got information coming in terms of what we should be doing and aligning it with the OCP and the applicant, and then people in the community are coming and saying, well, there's another part of your OCP that doesn't allow that. And so I always felt that we perpetually seem to be in these conflicts. And so I think it needs to be clearly articulated, and we got to make sure that those pieces that a conflict are removed to make sure it's simple to understand. And I think because it is a document and it's very large in essence in terms of all of these areas, like you've identified, 12 under 3 major goals. Now that I have this, I'll turn to looking at the OCP, looking at what the community is looking for now as a priority, and then take a look at that and how that, what are the things that I've been looking at over time. Like, for example, one of the things I think is needed more clearly defined is a vision for industrial lands. Industrial lands drive an economy, and I think, we need to be looking to the future for that. And that's what I think, but now I need to look at to see if that's something that fits in with what the public has asked for. So I think this is great. I appreciate all the work that's gone into it, and I look forward to going through this and having that conversation with you in terms of trying to, connect the two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's really one thing that isn't in here, you'll notice, is the land use designations, right? So that's a separate conversation, because this is really the values that this is based on. And so bear in mind that all of this can fit into every category within the land use designations.
Thank you. Councillor Berger, and then Mayor Tate.
Thank you. I forgot my OCP tonight. It's on my kitchen counter, and it's full of highlighted stuff. So I'm going to make an appointment to come and see you, rather than take up everybody's time too. But there's lots of points within our OCP that I really like, and they're highlighted a certain color. And then there's other points that I find, just like Councillor Pearson and other councillors, that are very contradictory and don't set, I don't feel, a realistic view on what our zones can and can't do. And I'll just clarify a little bit, and you just touched on it with industrial lands and future zoning. Just like Councillor Ray just said, we have industrial zoned property down by Casinos in 2 key areas. One of them in our current OCP has a future designation of being residential. Well, for 40 years it's been industrial. And so I don't know when that's supposed to become residential, but the remediation involved in making that residential would be, I think the cost would really be astronomical for whoever bought that. And then we've got residential land on Grant Road, almost by West Coast Road, that is residential right now, and it's future earmarked to become industrial. But the problem is it's ALR, so we don't have jurisdiction about rezoning that land. Those landowners have tried to take it out of the ALR, but they can't. They've spent thousands and thousands on studies to prove that they can't grow anything on that land. It's not farmable, and they still can't get it out. So that's where I have a tough time in going through our current OCP and seeing where things contradict each other. We identified that we would like to have industrial lands because we would love to encourage some sort of tech park or a new industry to come, but where do we put them? We can't start a new business on the current industrial lands because it's earmarked for future use to become residential. So if it doesn't fit within that current zone's use right now, then we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And then where we've got it identified, closer to the town center, and it's on sewer, which is great, but it's ALR, so they can't locate there until that comes out of ALR. So again, another hard situation that we're in. I've got lots of highlighted stuff within the developed permit area as well, being that just sort of falls into what I just talked about. I think we really need to look as a council, and I'd be interested to hear the feedback from the community as to what they saw for developed permit area. Looking through even just this, I went through and circled a few things and wrote a couple notes. I think it's fantastic that we have a plan for affordable housing, but we need to identify where that should be. And for me, that should be in the town center, on sewers, close to bus system, close to trails, close to everything that residents of part of affordable housing would need. So then that goes back to your comment of, are there key pieces that we try and, like the church is going to do? So do we try and promote that to certain societies or certain landowners that maybe we could say that's within our development permit area for affordable housing? Like, I'm not sure that we want to get as technical as our current OCP is, because I find it just really restricts us. Yeah. And then I also had the same thing as Councillor Pearson with water to our boundaries, and then what that looks like too, because that has hindered us previously within certain pocket development areas. I mean, I live less than 3 minutes from Sun River, but I just had to put in a well and septic field. And I could probably throw a rock from my land and have it land almost on Sun River's land. So I think we really need to sort of look at an overview of uses, but I really would hate for us to become so restrictive that we're found in a situation that we are right now. So I guess to stop rambling, I'll make an appointment with you and bring my highlighted book.
I think that's great. I think one of the key things that we've talked about as staff is exactly what you're talking about. The site-specific approach that the current plan has doesn't, I think, help us out very much. And so, again, keeping it higher level, a little more general, and then we can get down to affordable housing. Well, what does that take? Does that take smaller lots? Is that an issue related to density, right, and proximity to key areas? And so all of that can be addressed in the zoning bylaw. It doesn't. We state the value perhaps in the OCP, but those kinds of things we can battle at another level, and keep it very general up top. And I think that's all I'll say about that for now, but thank you.
Sorry, can I just jump in really quickly and just say thank you to you? Because that last statement speaks volumes. Because when we're looking at the OCP, even though it's our guiding document, to keep it visionary rather than really get down to the nitty-gritty, and it does become cumbersome. I mean, member of the public said earlier about business licenses. If she wants to grow her business and she wants to expand and she needs a loan, well, she has to prove that she has a viable business license. Well, if we want to attract certain people and we want them to succeed, and in here it talks about, creating jobs and affordable housing and all these wonderful things that we really want to see. Right now, we're so site specific that we create arguments for ourselves. Kevin brought up the car wash. Yeah. Here was a business owner who wanted to build something, a service for the community on land he already owned, already commercial, but we'd put ourselves in a tight spot by the OCP saying, oh, it shouldn't really go there. Well, where do businesses go? We want them in the town center. So I thank you, because I think it's going to be huge if we can sort of make it a little bit easier to maneuver.
That's great. One other thing on that too is that the OCP you're supposed to refresh it every 5 years, and so we have this. 5 years isn't very long away, but you also have this long-term vision, and so it's exactly that forecasting what we think that is going to look like and what we value into the future. But then what's the low-hanging fruit that you as council can try and achieve within a 5-10 year framework so that we're moving forward. And that was one of the things that I noticed when I started. We have this fantastic illustration of what Souk's supposed to look like in 2050, but that's a long way away, right? And how do we even plan for that? And so, baby steps might be helpful. Anyway.
Thank you, Mayor Tate.
Thank you, Councillor Casper, for taking the helm here, and Ms. Rice for the presentation. My apologies to all for my late arrival. I'm still coughing, so just bear with me here. I appreciate what you said in your last comments, in that the current OCP is looking 20 to 50 years out, because sometimes when a timeline is that far out, it doesn't focus on what you need to do in the moment. There's been comments about the laundromat and the like, and a lot of that almost looks at that entire property completely being redeveloped in its entirety, and then it'll become that. But when things come up in the moment, that's where you get caught off, because the OCP is saying one thing, and it's so far out that it's hard to look at what's happening in the moment. The current one being adopted in 2010, you don't have to answer this, but my thought is, in this past 7 years, what policies have we achieved? What have we done? What items in there can we actually check off? When I look at this, I love the layout of this. It's very attractive. It's very to the point. And a lot of these themes have been spoken out in the community time and time again. And so, I do believe that everyone is on the same page with this. I think it's more how these things are delivered and how do they roll out. So when we speak about affordable housing, this has been an argument for years. Well, is it affordable to who? To the developer to build, or to the person to attain? And when we looked at the formulas for affordable housing and the income thresholds, who is this based on? And you can argue and argue, so that almost needs to be defined on, because different people will everyone in this room will probably have a different definition on what they believe affordable housing actually is and whose perspective it's coming in from. There's comments in Design Green, and a lot of that has been spoken to in the last OCP. And there's been a few examples of some build-outs within our community that may have hit that, but probably not that many. So in this case, when we deliver this, how will it be delivered? Will it be affordable? Will people buy into it and actually do it? Or is it the case of, oh, it's just a guideline, we don't actually have to do anything? And then again, the concept, the importance of the environment comes back over and over again, and we're not meeting that at all. So is there a sort of bronze, silver, gold sort of standards, that in terms of what that means? And same, we're waiting for the province to finalize the sort of Highway 14 baseline assessment that they did. And that will potentially have an impact on what our short, medium, long-term goals are because of what they decide to do with the highway. And so if it's the case where the status quo is going to prevail and they'll just continue maintaining it, then I think we have to take that reality into consideration. It's the only road that feeds our community. Since the last OCP has come about, there's been significant changes in technology. So now there's fiber optic feed out to our community that wasn't in place when the last OCP was drafted. So how will that impact technology and what it looks like in Sooke going forward? What would that look like for job creation here? What types of jobs then would benefit from that feed? How can we take advantage of having that? Even social media didn't exist. I mean, Facebook was sort of on, but it wasn't as active. Now there's LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest and Flickr. I don't even know. Like, there's so many different ways that people communicate. And you can argue the pros and cons of this, but it's here. It's a reality. And is that something that we need to look at considering in some way? And so there's a lot of different pieces here. I just think it's a matter of how these things roll out and what that actually means when we come forward. So we see, for example, with preserving habitat, and then a developer comes along, instead of doing the parkland dedication, they want to give cash in lieu, and a lot of them do. So that sort of contradicts preserving the wildlife habitat. So what is the alternative then, and how do we look at doing that? Because then it'll just push the goals further away, and then, they're nice ideas, but we don't deliver on them. So that's the piece that I'm looking for. I think in our existing OCP, there's so many policy directions, so many things to do, and where do you start with all these things? It's creating a to-do list with 100 items on them. Where do you begin? It's almost too many, so then as a result, you don't do anything. And which do you pick from? So that's where I think it has to be. It's great to have a vision for the future, but I think it's taking the reality and being able to adapt, as others have said, in the here and now when different items come up from, what do we do with them? So that they're practical, and we are somehow shifting, because you could argue that decisions we've made in the last 7 years have gone in the opposite direction of the OCP. And then that goal is just harder and harder to achieve, so then you don't even bother. So in terms of what we'll see, are we going to see the existing OCP and then, like, with things struck through and a different layout, or what will we actually be moving forward with? What will happen to that document?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think that is totally up to Council, and Council providing us with some direction. I know that staff have worked really, really hard on getting community feedback, and now we're looking for Council direction on how you guys want to be involved and what you would like to see moving forward. There's certainly a number of different tacks we can take, one of which is we've got a bunch of questions in front of Mayor and Council right now, and they're big P policy questions that we need to grapple with as we move through our budget process. So I think ideally what I'd like to see, and what I might suggest, is that we have a series of meetings throughout maybe a 2-week span where we tackle some of those larger questions, i.e. growth, i.e. ALR, i.e. all the things that I ran through just previously. and really have a fulsome discussion at this table and in chamber with our public about where do we want to go, because this overarching document is going to form part of our plan for the next 5 years, and really trying to focus down on what's achievable in those 5 years. And I agree. I mean, a 50-year plan is great. It's wonderful to have that vision, but we need to pick some low-hanging fruit and make sure we're getting things done. So that's kind of how I would envision council moving forward and getting involved, is tackling those big P public policy tough questions that we have in front of you right now. What the document looks like in the end, we already know that we had legal counsel strip out everything that's not legally required to be in the document, because a lot of that was confusing to people, and that's where we got into some of those conflicts in our previous OC or our current OCP. So we'd like to see that kind of stripped down into a much higher level type of document, and see where the rubber hits the roads in our zoning bylaws. And I see nods around the table. I think that makes a lot of sense. But again, it's your table, it's your OCP. We're here to do what you want.
Thank you. So for myself, I would like to see a black line version of the existing OCP. So to see what has been determined to be legally not required, so that when queried or when pondering different things, then at least you understand this was removed because it legally doesn't apply, and that we know that, because this is the document that we currently have right now that we've been working with. It's familiar. It's what the community has. And so I think just having that noted, and also if things are no longer relevant, that document may make a lot of references to LEED standards. And now those have changed as well. So are there other standards in there that are also redundant or not applicable now because of whatever reason? There's something different, or it's been rebranded into something else. I think that would be helpful. And then if there's an idea of what a different layout. I mean, also I think staff has been working with this document as well. Every time there's a report that comes forward, you see the OCP relevance in it. So is there suggestions from the working side of the document on how it should be laid out from a more working perspective? I think that, for myself, I think that would be important as well. I think that if we are going to have a series of different meetings in the next while, if there's a way to sort of highlight and invite the community to attend those, so that they know these are key OCP-related dates, and these are the various topics. Even if we said, okay, I'm just picking a date at random, February 1st, it's policy on this, so that if there's 7, again, I'm just pulling a number, 7 different policies, and the meeting date has that policy question put out there, that it might resonate with different people to come and participate or to be present on that particular item. I think discussing something like sewer expansion is of great impact to this community, and I think the more outreach we do in obtaining feedback would be very critically important, so that it's later people just understand and what occurred in that matter. So the communication piece will be very important. And then we can see, at the end, is a document going to be half the size because of what's been removed, or are we adding a bunch of stuff in? And I don't know if there's a definitions section in the OCP. I can't remember. There is, okay. And I think just clarifying, like some of the language like thrivability, it always struck me because it just hits so many different spell check all the time. So when you have all these different words, I think they have to be just really real and not just what's sort of a buzzword of the day. That's my thoughts anyway.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other councillors? Any other councillors want to speak? Okay, I'm going to invite the public to speak or to have a comment before I speak.
Sorry. Hi. My name is Britt Santowski. I live at 2206 Church Road. I don't have the documents in front of me. I don't know the email that has gone out to you guys, but at the beginning of the presentation, I heard staff say that this is a document that represents the will of the people. And by the end of the conversation, I'm hearing that conversations might happen behind closed doors and that legal has stripped out things that are not necessary and required. I heard that. Did I not hear that? Anyways, I would just like to see that the... you're looking at me very funny. I was listening. Oh, okay. Should I speak closer? I would like to see that the will of the people is kept in there and that conversations are to include the public. And if you're going to go through an email list of policies, I appreciate that the public is not banging down the door to get in here on these conversations. But there are a handful of us who are concerned and want to just keep tabs on and make sure that it is a document that reflects the will of the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to pass on their comments? Okay. If I may, the thing that I have found troubling with this document, the current plan, is it's 212 pages. There are a number of, as other council members have referenced, contradictions. I'll point to one. The public supports strong agriculture, security for food. So we've got a section in our current document that talks about agriculture and all the value, but in the same breath, it makes a recommendation to remove land outside of the ALR to appease a decision that was made on Kaltassin Road to delete industrial land, to turn that into residential, so the offset was to create another block of land as industrial. It's pure and simple. They did not want, and I can't speak for other councillors, but the discussion was, well, we can't eliminate industrial land. We still have to maintain it. But then there's comments out there in the public, oh, I want industrial land. And I'm not talking about the small little properties on Grant Road. We're talking about the central core of the westerly part of Souk that are large parcels, fully intact, that are within the Agricultural Land Commission. Our municipality got our knuckles rapped when this plan was adopted because there wasn't adequate dialogue and consultation with ALC. We were told that point blank in 2012 when a number of us got elected. And what I heard anecdotally from previous councillors and members of the public, that a lot of people were very frustrated by the process, and some even viewed that they had a valid committee that had made a number of recommendations, both from the public side with public input and from the council side, but somehow the document got hijacked. Changes were made that people weren't satisfied with. They thought they had input, and things didn't turn out the way they all envisioned. And I heard the term hijack because they weren't involved in the process. Now, I try to look at documents like this as that, okay, what fruit did we pluck in the past 7 years? And there's been little or nothing. Little or nothing. And even our growth targets didn't even measure up to what reality was. The growth targets were huge that are included in this document. There's items in here that our own solicitor had identified with this council as far back as 2013 that did not make sense in being in the document. And I hope that these are the things that are clearly identified, and when it does come out that these are things that should be struck, then it should be explained as to why. I come from the school of thought, let's keep things simple. And I don't have a problem with a philosophical document that has some clear goals and some objectives that are outlined. But when you've got page after page after page, and in order to implement a fraction of what's in there, our municipality and council would have to be creating and adopting a whole host of regulatory bylaws that would actually put it in effect. Because that's what the legislation says. We're not obligated. There is no implied or confirmed commitment that this council or any other council has to implement anything in this document. And if they do, then they have to do it by regulatory bylaw. But it also says that those regulatory bylaws can't be in collision with this official community plan. And what I've seen is that in a number of instances, the plan has been in collision with our existing bylaws, our existing zoning, and I've seen, in essence, some people's property rights stripped away from them because of this community plan. So I'm not going to, belabor my comments any further. I'm going to take up the opportunity to actually talk to you directly about what I see should happen, because it's just input. And I don't have a problem with that being conveyed publicly as to what I had to say, because I'd say it at a public meeting, or I'll say it to staff directly. So, I look forward to seeing a draft, because then it will be either substantiated or not substantiated, the whole host of public input that was sought and gathered in the past few months. And I'm not faulting the process, but it's pretty hard for the public to actually make meaningful comments if they don't have a draft document that's being proposed, because that's a different story. And I think that's when the rubber hits the road as to what is going to be that document, and then that's where meaningful public input comes into play. This kind of gives you a flavor of what people are thinking, and I appreciate the work that staff have done on this. But there's a lot more to be done. So what's the wish of the committee? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Ray.
I guess just in response to Ms. Santowski's comment, I don't think I heard at this table that there was going to be any behind closed doors discussion when it comes to the OCP. The OCP is to be here in a public forum, and I'm sure that's a commitment that everybody at this table will make. So.
And if I may add one thing, if I may, in their staff report, and I've been looking at the legislation fairly closely, Council has to make a determination as how we're going to consult. And there are other agencies that this document, whether it's an amended version, a complete rewrite, or a refresh, is to go out to the different agencies and organizations. And, I think if we keep the process simple and keep it with past practice, then we're safe. And the reason I say that is because that's a proven track record for a number of municipalities around the province, and in particular in the capital region. So I think we should give our mind to that process too. Councillor Ray.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. And I'm just wondering, Ms. Rice made the comment that she's been involved in writing 5 other OCPs, and perhaps Ms. Rice might provide some insight as to what might help us as a council and the public move forward so that it doesn't create extra work either for staff and that it moves in a more of a streamlined process. Excuse me.
Staff, any comment? And then I'll go to Councillor Burke.
No, this is great. I'm just writing a big list here, so I really appreciate it, and it's good. It's where we need to go.
Councillor Burger.
Yes, thank you. And to answer sort of Ms. Rice's comments about what do we see. So going forward, what I would like to see is if we took 2 or 3 committee of the whole meetings and broke the draft OCP into 2 or 3 parts, and we could focus on those parts right in front of us. The public can have a copy, we can have a copy, look at what is existing, what we're going to change, and then have that dialogue back and forth. And again, I'd like the idea of using a committee of the whole so it can be less formal. We can get the public involved. And by the end of those 2 or 3 meetings, we will have gone through the OCP, and at the end, we can have a document that both public, council, and staff are satisfied with. And I include staff wholeheartedly because it's the applications that come to you that you have to try and make work within our current OCP that sometimes just don't. So I would love to see it done that way, where we can actually have it in front of us and it can be centered on, whether we split the document in half and do 112 pages each night or however you see fit. But to me, that works best where we all have it in front of us and we can just sort of itemize it and go through.
Can I just comment on that?
Yes,
so
go ahead.
This is for me. This is the. It will be interesting. So I have, for instance, I've started to draft policy. I have one here based on air quality, for instance, right? And comparing apples to apples that's a bit of the challenge because the way the existing document is written, we have, I forget whatever it is, 10 different topics or whatever they happen to be, and they're kind of intermingled. And so I'm going to be dragging things from here and there and putting them in a stack here. And then I've also got the public consultation that I've done where I've made things, organize them thematically. And so I'm trying to cross-compare. And not to say that it can't be done, but this is, I think, the exercise that needs to be done. And to then just try and glean the most important part of that and turn it into very simple language is the challenge, right? Like if I have 25 people saying we have asthma in the area, we have air quality issues, we need to deal with climate change. Where does that fit? Does that fit in health policies? Does that fit in our greenhouse gas policies? Does that fit in transportation policies? And because right now it's repeated in every single one. So that's where it's going to take some time, and it's an art to really refine that language to make it as bulletproof as possible. So just so you know.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to come back to a comment that Mayor Tate made, and in terms of the tracking of the document, and it's just something to throw out. I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is what did the legal opinion say to take out? Like if I could see the OCP, 212 pages, and just see what legal has said to take out, then I can work from starting from a new document or a different format. And when I say new, it's in the terms of refreshing, not as in new, we're going in a whole new direction. But I think for me that would help just to see what legal has asked us to take out of that document. And I think for me that would help simplify the challenge that Ms. Rice may have.
Yes, CA.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Ray and Berger. It's critically important for us to have that black line document to you in front of you and our public so that everybody has a clear understanding of what legally an OCP is and what it isn't. And by stripping out a lot of the stuff that is not supposed to be in our OCP, I think we'll streamline it and keep it at a higher level. And that's when the beginning point of us streamlining our bylaws with the refreshed OCP. So that's going to take a considerable amount of effort. And I want to reiterate what Ms. Rice said is we can't be comparing apples to apples with respect to the 2010 OCP and what we'll be proposing, because even the stripped out language is going to be a different foundation upon which we start to grow again. It's not saying that we're going to have completely switched directions or anything like that, but the look and feel of the document is going to be quite substantively different. Not saying the direction is, but how we present the information and not having it duplicated in every single section will help, I think, clarify things a lot.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pearson, then Berger, and
Yeah, and through the chair to you, to the CAO, I appreciate that. And, you know, I hear in the background there that I think what you're saying is that the essence of the original document has to be maintained, because there was a ton of work from a ton of really, really good people. And, you know, going back to the chair's comments earlier about the hijack principles, we can't have that happen again, because, you know, I know many people who worked on that prior one, and then when it came back from that fancy named guy, no one could read it, and hopefully he's not listening. But it was taken out of everyone's hands, and it can't happen again. That's the essence got to be captured from this, because there's some really valid, cool points in this. It's a good document in essence. It's the gobbledygook that's wrapped around the intent. Thank you.
And just a point of clarification for myself. The current OCP that we have, is that the gobbledygook version you're referring to? Okay, so we need to get the gobbledygook out of that. I think we're on the same page. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Berger.
Yes, thank you. And although I don't have eloquent gobbledygook words, I think we're pretty much saying the same thing. And my comment about how we splitting it in half is, I do want to see, as everybody else, the black line of what's coming out. And then I wholeheartedly, like, for me, it's just your notes. Like, for you to say, on the topic of air quality, currently in our gobbledygook, we have it in point 1, 2, 4, 7, and 12. And what I've done is I've simplified that and done that here. So it doesn't, for me, it doesn't need to be fancy. Just even your note form of, this is where I took all this gobbledygook, and then this is how I've simplified it and made it work in our new draft document. So that was really just what I meant by really just your notes. Thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Yes, and this is a question just for clarification in terms, if this OCP and what's in it was hijacked, where is the information that was there that is no longer there? Because I guess my thinking is, should that not be something that is being considered? I put it out there because if this isn't what the people asked for, where is the information that was?
Well, if
I mean, I'm just asking. I wasn't on council.
If I
then.
may, you know, I wasn't on council. Councillor Berger was there, Councillor Tate, and Mayor Tate. She was a councillor then. Can either one of you add? Was there a sense of frustration?
There was a sense of frustration amongst some members of the public, some landowners, members of council. We had frustrations. So I think if we go back and look at it, it was certain property areas, certain languages. There was languages about possibly expropriating people's waterfront property all along the basin. I mean, there was lots of different little sections along the way that we're in there and we're not in there, we're taken out, we're not in there. So I think the only way to actually find that is if we go back to I think we had 4 or 5 draft documents before the one that was adopted. And in each draft document, and again, you got to go through your 200 pages, and I might have some of them, I'll have to look, there are differences. And so they were sort of site-specific when it dealt with land uses, if I can remember correctly. Mayor Tate maybe can jump in, but I think it was more that overview of people weren't consulted with, they currently have industrial and its future objective is now going to be residential. And just different things like that, that were sort of changed without a lot of knowledge.
If I may.
Go ahead.
From what I recall, and I'm looking at the OCP now, there were 2 different district planners involved in the OCP. There were 2 different chairs of the committee, and then there were different members on the committee altogether, and it almost seemed to span. It was coming in towards the end of the council before us, and then it was, and I remember sitting in the chambers at the time and thinking that there was a draft, I think one of the drafts was endorsed by the council. And after we got elected, the process almost did a restart with a change in membership and the like. And then I remember there was sort of, we were sitting as a council, the committee was here, and there were some members of the public that were involved saying, this is all different now, like everything is shifting and changing. And it was like the things were starting. And I think there were, as Councillor Berger said, 4, maybe 5 different drafts. And then it just kept going on and on and on. And that's where it just seemed to become a bigger and bigger document at the time. And I almost got the sense that the consultant then is like, okay, we'll just try to appease everybody in this, even though you guys don't agree with one another at all. And that's where I wonder sometimes if that's how the contradictions evolved, because there was different views. And then, of course, everything that Councillor Berger said. And then there was this document that came about towards the end of 2009 and then into 2010. And it was this long, over 2-year process with many different people involved. The budget was, I think, well over double, if not more, than what was anticipated. And then there was a lot of frustration throughout because things would appear, and then in the next draft, they were just not there at all anymore. And then in another draft. So you'd almost have to have, so it just seems almost too laborious to go through now all of these drafts to find out what was missed, because I think the public consultation that you have is going to bring those matters forward again, or they may have been addressed. And then what happened after we adopted it, we seemed to keep amending, doing OCP amendments. So it seemed odd to me at the time, going thinking, well, we adopted this OCP and now we're amending it many times over. So something doesn't seem right if within a year's time you're suddenly making amendments to your OCP. Is that about right, Councillor Berger? Also, I mean, it's been a while, but that's where it just seemed to be kind of interesting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ray.
Yeah, and thanks for that information, because I certainly don't want to smooth us backwards either. As was presented at the beginning of your presentation, there's been extensive consultation, and if people still have those issues today that they felt were missing from before, there'll be opportunities as we go through this public consultation that those items could come back onto the table if people feel strongly that they were missed. So I'd hate to see us move backwards.
Okay, Mayor Tate.
Another question I have is in terms of going forward. So the OCP is drafted, we eventually adopted. After that, we have a series of master plans, and it was sort of the same thing. The last OCP was adopted, and then there was all these different master plans put forward that were adopted, and then the zoning bylaw, and then that was sort of redone twice. So are we now going to be looking at having to redo all these plans? Or refresh them, I guess, over time?
Your worship, through to Mayor Tate. Your worship,
through
to your
the
measure.
Through the chair to the mayor.
I'm not sure which master plans you're talking about. We have, as you suggested, we have several master plans. There's some master plans that probably would not need changing. There are some master plans that probably will need changing or amending. One that comes to mind are, there's a master transportation plan may require some refreshing and some rethought. Sewer servicing master plan, that may require some thought as well. And I'm sure there's other little master plans that we have out there that I'm not familiar with, but we can review after the OCP is completed or the OCP process is completed. We can start looking at those along with the influence of the zoning bylaw of the OCP as well.
Okay, because I think there's like the town center, the parks and trails, the transportation ones, so sort of thinking of those. And I appreciate that they would need to be refreshed after the OCP. The concern that I have then is that we spend all of our time and effort refreshing plans and we don't actually do anything because, the plan is up to date, and then whenever you do your zoning, everything sort of freezes while the zoning is being adjusted. So then it's the case of, we're between plans now, we have to rewrite this plan, and then we have to do this plan. So we can't do anything. 5 years goes by, and then, we time to refresh the OCP, and then you start this process all over again. So I just, because it sounds like a lot of work, but I just want to caution that we still need to do things in this town. We have sidewalks we need to do, like there's roads that need to be connected, so we have to get on the ground and deal with the infrastructure that's failing and all these things and not be rewriting all the plans all the time. That's just, for me anyway, it just irks me because there's so many plans. They'd probably dig out some old ones and they'd be new again. I don't know.
Mr. Howard?
Your Worship, if I may, through to Your Worship. To the chair, to the Worship. Through the OCP review, like you alluded to, the Trail Master Plan, that is a very good document, and that should be looked at the same time as we're reviewing the OCP, and we can start doing that. The Transportation Master Plan is another one that can be in concert with the OCP. So when the time comes to refresh them or review them, we're not starting again. We got bases within the OCP to look at.
Right, and if I may add, if you start changing land use designations, terminology, and alike, then those are the things that kickstart amending your bylaws. And it's probably the safest bet to try to keep it as simple as possible. There's no harm in having a philosophical document, and if there's 12 key areas that should be highlighted as part of your community's vision, then that's what it is. To back that up is a series of bylaws. Well, if the vision embraces the standard we have with our zoning bylaw, our parks and trails, our roads, whatever, then you're not out of sync. And I agree with what our mayor said. I don't want to see us go down a path where you have to rewrite everything because you decide to make a change with the official community plan. Because it will not solve anything. And the next thing you know, 5 years are up.
Yeah,
and you start all over again. So anyway, I want to get us back on track here. So we've had a frank discussion. We've had a little bit of public input. So it's agreed that we would be sitting as a committee of the whole in the coming months to deal with a first version after council members have approached Ms. Rice and take up that opportunity to have a discussion with her on what they think are some key issues. And then at a public meeting, then those comments would be reinforced and again brought forward publicly, correct? Does that make sense? Okay. So I just looked to your guidance. Do we necessarily need a motion other than to receive the initial OCP report?
So moved.
Is there a seconder? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And I want to thank everybody for the frank discussion and the public input. So there's no new business. So could I get a motion to adjourn? Move second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.